Hello again. Hopefully you have gone to get some creative resources. I've got some creative resources around here. I've gone to, well, as you can see, I'm filming this from the centre, so I've gotten the art boxes here full of colourful things and sticky things and scissors and pencils. I've got these slides for this week, so I'm going to talk you through some things, some key bits of information that you might like to include. Now, don't forget, these are just the very basics, and I'm hoping that you will get excited about this piece of work and include even more besides. So, Monday, today, after you've seen this, I've made this lighter, and please, if you need to do some of this work, Monday's work tomorrow, then do feel free to carry it on, because you'll see that the tasks will take different lengths of time depending on whether you are better at the more knowledge-based stuff or at the more creative-based stuff. Hopefully there's equal amounts of each week. Today, your country needs a name. All countries get named at some point, when they're discovered, when they're colonised. So what will your country be called? Obviously, my country will be called J-Land because it's my country. So that made sense to me. You might have a different reason for naming your country something different. And how have you chosen your name? For me, I didn't put much thought into it. I just thought, well, that's my country. That's what I'll name it. What will your citizens be called? Because, of course, if this is your country, then what are your citizens called? So, because I was born in this country, I am British. I'm a British citizen. So what will your citizens be called? And I have got over here the information. And for me, people who are living in J-Land are J-Landians, because again, that just makes sense to me. You might have a different reason for choosing the title that your citizens have. Where's your country? Now, if you could place your country anywhere in the world, where will you put it? So, remember I said that if I could live anywhere, I'd live in Southampton, because of it being a combination of city and seaside. Well, I thought that J-Land might be where the Isle of Wight is, and that I could just somehow kind of colonise the Isle of Wight. So, as you can see here, on my big piece of flip chart paper, I've drawn the Isle of Wight, which is a kind of diamond shape, give or take. I've also included just here, look, that the UK mainland is just up here and is actually a short ferry ride away. So for me, J-Land needs to have little ports. I might put more ports in, but for now, there's one port. And so the ferry, the little boat, can have good transport links with mainland UK. So that's the basics of the information. What will your country be called? What will your citizens be called? Where will your country be? Secondly, what about the leadership? Who runs your country? Now, you might be the obvious answer. You might want something different. Don't forget that in your earlier pieces of work on governance, you saw that there were lots of different forms of governance, because not all are governments, about how much power the leaders have, how they're chosen. So I want to ask you, in your country, who runs it and how are they chosen? Where do they live? How are they funded? And who helps them? So, for example, in Britain, we are run by, it's more complicated. A constitutional monarchy is more complicated because we've got this dual leadership of the Queen and of Parliament together, keeping each other in check and balance, so neither of them can make a bizarre rule and just do what they want. How are they chosen? Both of those in Britain have got different ways of being chosen. In the royal family, they are just born into the job. The Queen never really got a chance to choose her job. She knew what she would be doing as her job from when she was a really, really small child. And she started her job as the monarch at quite a young age. Whereas, of course, in government, then people need to be elected. They get elected as MPs, they get elected as the Prime Minister. So it's a very, very different system. So let's say that you were choosing to run your country. Who would take over from you? And also, who would help you? Who would help you run your country? It's really important, of course, to know where you live. For me, in J-Land, as was the Isle of Wight, I want to live somewhere quite central. Now, I'm not one for oldie-worldy castles and properties like that, so I really like new builds, you know, these shiny new apartment block things. So Chateau de Jay, right in the middle here, is going to be where my residence is. Not royal. I'm not after being the monarch. I would really like for J-Land to be a Commonwealth country. So sitting under the Queen, because personally, I'm quite a fan. You're free to have a different perspective, but personally, I'm a fan of her. And I would be almost like the on-site manager for this country. So that's where I would live. I would have my governance chosen, who would help me, chosen through application process and through invitation. If I see somebody whose character I like, I'd want them to help me. So that's how I would choose people. And if people who I did not know wanted to apply, they'd be free to. I would want to actually work part-time as an ordinary job. I've had many trades very similar. So at the moment, obviously I'm a teacher by trade. I would want to do some kind of part-time work, so I'm not just making my keep being the governor. So that's all for Monday. I'd like you to add your country name, your citizen's title, and where your country is, and for what reasons, of course. With all of the questions throughout the whole piece of work, I'd really love to know the reasons for your answers. With leadership, who runs your country? Just because it's your country doesn't necessarily mean that you run it or that you run it alone. You might want to. And you'll remember from your work initially on governance that you've got options like republic, where there's no king or queen. You've got options like anarchy, where there's no governance, although that usually doesn't actually last for long at all. Democracies, where people have to be chosen very, very carefully. Dictatorships, where one person rules without being chosen by the people. And if you remember, one of the tribes that was a dictatorship sounded quite pleasant because there was one ruler and they looked after all of their people. And governance, which is a dictatorship, can be caring, but it's still one person in control. So that is today's tasks. Have a look back at your slide, please, for Monday. Have a look through at what you need to add and add that much for today. Have a lovely time. And you can either pause this here and work on today's, or carry on and listen to the whole week's instructions. If you're carrying on, then here I am carrying on. If you've paused and it's Tuesday, then welcome back, hence the same clothes. I'm filming this all in one go. I'm not wearing the same clothes as yesterday. And this is your second piece of information to add to your governance project. You've stated your country's name, your citizens' names, where your country will be, who runs it, where they live, how they're chosen, who helps them, how they're funded. Today, I'd like to know about your country's flag. Every country has a flag. If you look inside an atlas, you can see loads of different pages of country flags. If you look on your phone, you can often see under the emojis section there's a flag space, and you can choose different countries of the world's flags. What's your country's flag going to be? Some flags are very simple. I'm thinking of Japan. red circle inside a white rectangle. Other countries' flags are more varied, more intricate details. I'm thinking of USA, which has got a specific number of stars and stripes. And some countries' flags have evolved over time. I'm thinking about our flag, the flag of the UK. And what would your flag be? I'm going to give you just a working example. So obviously your creativity is your own process, and I'm looking forward to seeing those, really am. And here is the flag for J-Land. Now what I've chosen here is I've got in the middle a cross, because, and more on this later, I would want my country to be a Christian nation. And as I was designing this flag, I was thinking, actually, what kind of colours, what kind of patterns would make the values that I want this country to have stand out. So all that I've got here is a yellow cross to show that I would want Christ at the centre of my country. Again, yours might have a different outlook and a different flag, and I'm looking forward to seeing the many, many flags coming back. The fire of the Holy Spirit on the outside, and that might remind you, if you know of it, of the Salvation Army's flag. The green down here represents newness of life. I'd want this to be a life-filled country. The blue represents hope. Show it a bit closer. And the kind of cyan, note the magenta, colour, that's cyan, that's magenta, is about creativity, that this will be a place of fresh ideas. I hope that it will take you 45 minutes to think, get inspired, and get creative with the art materials. Have a brilliant session, a brilliant lesson working from home. And I'll pause here if you're going to watch for the next bit, or if you're going to watch the next bit tomorrow, see you tomorrow. And here we are with the next day's worth of inspiration for your country. And that's as follows. For the third session, I'm going to ask you the following thing. What rights and responsibilities will your citizens have? Now, in Britain, we have loads of rights and loads of responsibilities. There's human rights across the world, and you studied some of those in the very, very, very first piece of home learning. What rights would your citizens have? And what I want you to focus on is listing the 5 most important rights that your citizens are entitled to. Because rights are an entitlement. They just go without saying. But in proportion to rights, is the opposite of needing responsibilities as well. So for each right that your citizen is entitled to, what will their responsibilities be as well? So that's all you need to do for today. But I'd like 5 thoroughly thought through and well written rights and accompanying responsibilities. What rights do your citizens have, and what responsibilities come with each of those rights? If you remember that worksheet that said, it had those comic strips in with those characters that said, I have the right to, there was one that said free speech. This means that I have the responsibility to, and another statement. So again, with yours, my citizens will have the right to such and such. That means that they have the responsibility to, and so on. That's all for your third day of home learning. Now, for the fourth day of home learning, this is what you're going to add today, just like we're doing in the centre. How much freedom do your citizens have? How much freedom do your citizens have? Now remember, there's only one sort of governance where there's total freedom. That's anarchy. That's where anything goes, and normally they're not healthy systems. There's no boundaries, and so it's filled with chaos. What about your country? You might have chosen an anarchy, that's fine. But otherwise, how much freedom do your citizens have? I'm thinking things like, have you got a law system? Is there a legal system in place? Remember, there was a police officer came to talk about stop and search just before we went to distance learning at school. So a question that I might have for you would be, is there free speech? Like in here in Britain, the newspapers can say whatever they want. They can criticise politicians. In other parts of the world, that would not be allowed. That would be dangerous and forbidden to do. Is there a state religion? I've said that for me, my country will have, but will yours? In Britain, there is a state religion. The Church of England is the state religion, but people are free to have their own religious beliefs. And tolerance and valuing other people's beliefs is a British value. Is there a free press? I've said, can the newspapers write what they want? Or will you control what goes into the newspapers? Or is it half and half? Will you have an influence, but still they'll have some freedom? What about protests? Here we've had Extinction Rebellion block up Oxford Street. There's Fathers for Justice that scales important buildings to make their point. In some countries, that's not allowed. What about in your country? Is there protest? Is that legal? What about the media? What about television? What about radio? Can they say what they want? Do you have an influence? Do you have a preference? I'm not really big on TV, so I'm not that interested in what goes on. But I'm just thinking, I might make sure, because I'm challenging myself here, what I would do is make sure that in the news that was reported, you know, the local news for the country, because mine's a small country, that they would have at least half of it as good news stories, because I want this to be focused on good news as well as maybe stories that would interest people. What about what's good happening around? What about if people dislike you? Are they free to do that? What if people lie about you? These are all things that all of these different forms of governance need to think about. So that's what I'm leaving you with this session. So by the end of this week, what you'll have put in your piece of work so far is background details about your country. What's it called? What your citizens called? Where is it? What about the governance as it is? Who runs it? How are they chosen? Who helps them? Where do they live? The second day, you would have started to design a flag. And I want you to think about adding a motto as well with the flag. So your flag is a symbol. Maybe you studied symbols in RE at school. A symbol says something deeper. So that's the symbol. And for me, my motto for J-Land is Det Spre Glorie, which is just me typing something into a translator. So Det Spre Glorie means land of hope and glory. I would hope that my country would be a hope-filled place and a glorious place where people's lives are made better. So flag and motto. Thirdly, I asked you look at the rights that your citizens are entitled to and any responsibilities that come with those rights. And fourthly, how much freedom do your citizens have? I hope you have had a fantastic week. I was thrilled to do this filming. I am really excited and I'm looking forward to seeing all of these countries when you bring them back, when eventually we gather. So I hope you have a wonderfully creative, fun-filled week doing this work. And I look forward to seeing you again by video to explain the next stages of making your own country.